So now we're going to talk about our last group of primates, the anthropoids. We have two goals for this lecture. First, we just want to talk about what they are, and then we'll go more into depth into the individual groups within anthropoids. So let's orient ourselves again. We've already talked about our strepsirrhines, our lemurs and lorises. We've talked about our haplorhines and a little bit about tarsiers, this weird group of primates that has been split off and been evolving independently for a long time. So now we're going to talk about the anthropoids. These are our monkeys, apes, and humans. These are the primates that people are probably already really familiar with. So our anthropoids, now these are diurnal primates. Almost all of them are active during the day. We also have full post-orbital closure. So you can see in this skull here, you can't stick your finger all the way through the eye socket. The holes in the back there, those are just for the optic canals because we do want our nerves to be able to get to our eyes so they can communicate to our brain, but there is no true opening at the back. We also see even more so relatively larger brains. We're seeing lots and lots of social structures and social interaction between anthropoid primates. And overall, there's just this emphasis on vision. But anthropoids is a really big group in and of itself, so let's start talking about the individual groups within here. So we're going to start right here with our platyrrhines, or New World monkeys. So here is a lovely platyrrhine. This is a capuchin. These are really smart. If you go to Central or South America and you go to a wildlife park, you're probably going to encounter a capuchin who's going to try to steal your lunch. These guys are named for their flat noses. So I'm not a platyrrhine. See how my nose sticks out? This guy, his nose is kind of flat. So you need his nostrils are kind of going out to the side. We call them flat or broad nose. Most of these are arboreal or they live in the trees. And these guys are highly social. They're really fun to watch and see how they interact with each other. Within platyrrhines, there are several groups. First, we have our callitrichids. Then we have our Pitheciidae, Aotids, Cebids, and Atelids. Our callitrichids or Callitrichidae, these are our marmosets and tamarins. These guys are super small and oh so cute. We see a couple different mating systems. They're both monogamous and polyandrous. What's really cool about these guys is we actually see some twinning. While most other primates only have one offspring at a time, these guys frequently have twins. These guys really often eat fruits and insects. I do want to draw your attention to this thing. This is a tamarind with a D. Tamarind is a fruit. Tamarin is a monkey. What's another really cool thing about these guys is because they are so small and they generally have twins, we usually have one female mating with two males because each of the fathers will be carrying one of the babies so mom can go and feed herself. Let's, of course, look at these pictures. So here's our pygmy marmoset. We also have the Callitrichs. One of my personal favorites is the golden lion tamarin. They are just so gorgeous. And then we have our Asaguinus, this little mustache tamarin. Next, we have our Aotids, or our owl monkeys. There are a couple different species here, but you can see they kind of look like an owl for how they're named. Their eyes are, again, super big. These are I think the only exception of an anthropoid that is actually nocturnal. These guys are primarily active at night. I love their just glowing orange eyes here, and they have these beautiful markings on their face. These guys are, of course, nocturnal. They are also occasionally used in malaria research. Next, we have our Cebids. These are our capuchins and squirrel monkeys. These guys are a little bit bigger than the ones we just talked about. So these are medium sized, and these guys have really large social groups. These guys primarily eat fruit or are frugivores. So here is a young little capuchin here. These guys use tools. While monkeys in general are smart, cebids are smarter than the rest of them. So here he's trying to use this big old rock to crush open this nut here. It's interesting to watch how they learn because they don't explicitly teach each other, but the young ones kind of look and see that this is possible, so they start to figure it out for themselves. Within cebids, we have our cebus or our capuchins, and then a cymeri, the adorable little squirrel monkeys. Um, I um, the capuchins are fairly often shown in circuses or other media, and I also fairly frequently see pictures of squirrel monkeys as well. Next, we have our Pitheciids. So these are our titi monkeys, sakis, and uricarids. These are some titi monkeys here. They do the most adorable thing of mated pairs. They twine their tails together to show that they love each other. These guys are medium size. They eat fruits and seeds. And let's look at a couple pictures here. Again, we have our titi monkeys up top, but we also have some that look a little bit weirder. We have our uakari with its bright red face, the saki who's super fluffy, and look, there's also some fluffiness around the face of our saki monkeys here. These guys tend to eat unripe fruit or really hard nuts, so they have this strategy of they're trying to eat the things that other animals aren't eating. Next, we have our atelids. You've probably seen some depictions of these before. These are our spider monkeys, howler monkeys, and woolly monkeys. They're a little bit larger, medium to large, and they have this prehensile tail. So only atelids can actually use their tail in this way, but you've probably already seen a picture like this because it's just so cool that their tail is strong enough and has that grip to be able to actually act as a fifth appendage. These guys primarily eat leaves and fruit. But of course, it's more important to look at these pictures here. So we have our adorable little spider monkey, our howler monkey, which it's named appropriately. They are very loud. Then we have our mariki and our woolly monkey. And you can see all of them that show their tail, they are actively using it to help keep their balance in the treetops. So these are all of the major groups of platyrrhines. Let's relocate ourselves. We just talked about our platyrrhines and New World monkeys, and now we have our catarrhines. And you can see there's actually still two groups within our catarrhines. Catarrhines are Old World monkeys, and within this group we have our monkeys, apes, and humans. This here is a baboon with this majestic little mane here around its face. Catarrhines are named for hook nose because you can see we are catarrhines. We kind of have this nose that sticks out or a little bit of a hook, and now our nostrils are pointing down rather than out like our platyrrhines. Now we see quite a wide range. While many of them are arboreal and live in the trees, many catarrhines are terrestrial and live on the ground, just like we do. These guys are highly social. Baboons have some of the most complex social structure out there, and there's multiple levels going on. There are many differences that we can look at between our platyrrhines and our catarrhines. A little bit differences with how the bones connect on the side of the head. They are named for the differences in their nose. Are they pointing down or the nostrils pointing out? There's a little bit going on with the ear tube in the back. And you'll also see there's a slight difference in the number of teeth. Platyrrhines have 3 premolars. Catarrhines, like ourselves, we only have 2. So now that we've talked a little bit about what catarrhines are, let's go back and start talking about the groups within catarrhines. First up is our Old World monkeys, or Cercopithecoids. Cercopithecoids are some of the most successful groups of primates. They're just everywhere throughout the Old World. You can find them in almost all of Africa, except for the Sahara Desert, and they are in so many places throughout Asia. These guys have really large social groups, and we see something called sexual dimorphism. When you encounter a word like this, I like to break it down into its component parts, because while it might look scary now, break it down, it helps you understand the meaning. Di means two, and morph means form. So this means there are 2 different forms, and the sexual on the front end, that just means the 2 different forms are based on the sexes, so males look different than females. And of course, there's just so many of these, and many of them are widely distributed. So our Cercopithecoids, they are quadrupedal, so they have 4 limbs. Here we're comparing them to our apes, which we'll talk about next. Cercopithecoids, they are primarily run on the trees or the ground, so all of their arms and legs are about equal length. They also have something called bilophodont molars, so they have these dual ridges of spikes on their teeth. So you kind of see there's 2 lophs, and each loaf has 2 crests or spiky pointy bits. So that overall, there are four little cusps on each of their molar teeth. Within Cercopithecoids, we have a couple different groups. Here are the guenons. These guys are primarily in West Africa, and they are the most colorful group of monkeys, though there are individual species which are more colorful. This one, Cercopithecus lomiamiensis, this was actually recently discovered by some of the people in my lab, the lazula, which is really pretty. These guys primarily eat fruit. They have cheek pouches. They actually can store food in their cheek for later. And here, there's just so many different faces going on in these guys. And this is why we call them the most colorful group of primates. What's really interesting is some of guenon species live in the same place at the same time. And that causes some problems for species recognition because you only want to mate with a member of your species because then your offspring might not be viable. So we think that they evolved this really wide diversity in faces. Some have these eyebrows, some have these nose spots, some have like colors right along their cheeks to make it easier for them to figure out who is my species and who is another species. Another really common group of Old World monkeys is macaques or genus Macaca. This is just showing two species here. We have Macaca mulatta. They're just everywhere in Asia. They're so successful, they're pests. And there's multiple species that we can talk about. Part of the reason why they're pests and why they're so successful is they're really smart. I believe in some areas of the world they actually raid crops. You can see that there is a little bit of diversity here in our macaques. So up top we have our black-crested macaques. I actually got to see some of these when I was in Sulawesi. At the bottom here we have our Japanese macaque resting in the hot spring there. They warm up in the hot springs over the summer because they live in the northern part of Japan in Hokkaido, which has pretty rough winters there. And then we have a couple other versions of macaques throughout the world. Another interesting genus here is Mandrillus, or our mandrills and drills. So here is our mandrill, probably the most colorful individual species out there with its glorious red nose and blue stripes on either sides. The males, during their prime, they are supremely brightly colored, and that's what attracts the females. These guys live in West Africa, and they are very, very big. Very big. Do not get in a fight with a mandrill. You will lose. And these guys have really high sexual dimorphism. So in this picture, you can see the male is about twice as large as the female. Like the males are built, and the females are much smaller. Very closely related to our mandrills, we have genus Papio, or our baboons. They are not quite as colorful as their cousins, the mandrills, but they are super successful. They just live all throughout Africa. There's some that live more south, some that live in the west, some in the east, and these guys are also very large. They also, again, have high sexual dimorphism like their cousins, the mandrills, but they have really complex social behavior. They have these multi-layered societies where there's, one group and then a larger type of group and an even larger group organization after that. Some baboons have also been seen to hunt. So I believe this is a rabbit here in this picture, but there's also been some documentation of specific baboon tribes learning how to hunt flamingos. Also closely related, we have genus Theropithecus or geladas. These guys live in the Ethiopian highlands, and instead of eating fruit or hunting, they actually eat grass. So we call these gramnivores. So instead of like walking around, these guys are actually sitting most of the day. So they have specialized pads on their butt so they can sit for a long time. And they have really unique sexual displays. Almost other old world monkeys have bright asses to communicate with other members of their species. But you can see now their sexual display is on their chest. They have this really cool like little time sand timer symbol like thing. And that's how they communicate their sexual status to their conspecifics. And these males here are super fluffy with these glorious manes. Here he's doing a threat display because this male does not want you to come near his women. We also have monkeys that specialize in eating leaves. So we have a subgroup within Old World monkeys are our Colobines, or leaf-eating monkeys. Again, these are folivores, they eat lots of leaves. And now to deal with eating leaves, like leaves are not easy to digest. They have a really specialized stomach. Like cows, they actually ferment stuff in their stomach. And you can see it's just a lot longer to give them more time to digest everything they can out of these difficult to digest leaves. We have some African colobines, our black and white colobus with these lovely little like white mane-like things on their body. And then we have our red colobus. Red colobus are beautiful, and they are also one of the favorite snacks of chimpanzees. And we have different colobines in Asia, and the Asian ones tend to be really gorgeous. So here is our Dukelanger. I love the coloration of, this little mane around his face, but also his face. And then our snub-nosed monkeys in China are both beautiful with their golden fur, but their face also kind of looks like a sunken skull. And then we also have our Nasalis, our proboscis monkey, which has this huge old nose here. So you can see there are just so many different types of old world monkeys or Cercopithecoids, and some specializing in fruit and others specializing in leaves. So now you finally reached the last group we're going to talk about, our apes. It's us. And these are our hominoids. So hominoids are apes and humans. We don't have any tails, and now we're seeing a wide variety of diets, and also a wide range of social systems. The one thing that unites us is we are something called orthograde. Our back tends to be straight up and down, while many of other primates are pronograde, or they are horizontal. Their spine is horizontal to the ground. And as a part of this, we have really mobile shoulders because we think the ancestral hominoid hung below a branch. So it needed this mobile shoulder to be able to do that. As a part of this, we have wide chests, and our scapula is moved towards the back. Again, so we have more range of movement here. Just take a moment, roll your shoulder back, and be thankful for all that range of motion that you have. As part of this, our back is much shorter and less flexible because if you're hanging below something, you don't want to be super wiggly in your back. And we can compare this to old world monkeys where they have much narrower rib cages. Their scapula is on the side rather than the back. And they have this really flexible back there. And here's a nice way to compare our old world monkeys or Cercopithecoids versus our apes or hominoids. You can see there's a little bit of a difference in the skull. Apes have a really broad nose and we have a broad palate, and our brain is even a little bit larger. We also have really simple molars with low cusps, where Cercopithecoids have these really sharp, nasty, pointy teeth of death. And we have a relatively shorter trunk, but now we're seeing longer arms in our apes. So within our apes, we have a couple cool groups. First up is our Hylobatids, or our gibbons and siamangs. Here is one from genus Hylobatides. Look at his pretty little face there. Sometimes these are called lesser apes. This is not a really good name, and I do not encourage you to use this, but if you hear it, that's what they mean. They're just smaller, that's all. They're gorgeous, and I love them. These guys are highly territorial. So they find a part of the forest that is their territory and they will fight off any other gibbons from having that territory. As part of their territorial displays, they actually sing in the morning. It's really loud, but it's their way of being like, no, this is mine, go away. And they have my favorite form of locomotion ever. They do something called brachiation. So they are swinging from one bar and they swing to the next and swing to the next, through the trees, not the bars. So if you were ever on the playground and playing on the monkey bars, those aren't monkey bars, those are 8 bars. And within our hominoids, now we have our hominids, our orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans. All of these guys are super big. And now our brains are even larger. You can see we've just had this trend of increasing, and more large brains here. And all of these guys use tools. So let's start with our orangutan, or genus Pongo. You find them in Borneo and Sumatra. There's two different species, one in Sumatra, one in Borneo. You can see here on this range map. These guys are actually solitary, which is very different than the large social groups we've been talking about for most of our other primates here. These guys are primarily frugivores. They eat fruit, though in this season where there's not much fruit available, you will see them eating bark off of tree trunks. And they have something called quadrumanuous locomotion. Let's break this word apart. Quad is four. Manuous is hand. So four-handed locomotion. And this just means that they are using their feet as hands. And you can see this is a adult male. He's really big. If a heavy person falls, there is more force associated with that. Because orangutans are so big, they're at risk for injuring themselves more so than other primates if they fall. So you'll see orangutans moving much more carefully in the trees than any other smaller primate. And you can also see some really adorable orangutan babies. Here's a mom with her baby. Let's talk about the African ones. So now our chimpanzees and gorillas. So this is a really cool range map. So you can see that chimpanzees and gorillas actually live pretty close to each other. Some of them overlap, but many of them also do not. Let's start with our gorillas. So this is genus gorilla. They live in Africa. They are very big, and they have something called a harem social group. So they will have one adult male and several females in the group. Harem is a loaded term, and in many ways we are trying to get away from the usage of this term, but it does describe what's going on. But of course, it's most important to look at our pictures here. So we have an adult silverback male. So you can see they have, this guy's a little bit of silver right here. He'll have more on his back and a little bit on his legs there. That is a mark of a mature male. It's actually not a sign of aging in gorillas. Then we have our peaceful female there and our little gorilla baby who needs a nap. Getting closer to us, now we have genus Pan, our chimpanzees and bonobos. You can see here there's a wide variety in faces. So, some faces are a little bit narrower, some are broader, some have a more pronounced brow ridge. There's, slight differences in coloration of the fur, their skin, and the placement of their fur on their face. These guys live in Africa and they use tools. They are the smartest primate except for us. There are two different species within our chimpanzees. We have our bonobos and then our common chimpanzees. You'll see bonobos are a little bit smaller and just a little bit more slender or gracile. Chimpanzees are a little bit larger and just a little bit more built. One cool thing they do is they do something called knuckle walking as well as gorillas. So you see they kind of curl their fingers up and they walk on their knuckles. You can see curling up their fingers and walking just like that. I personally find it a little bit hard because if you look at my knuckles, they don't line up very well, so I can't stack my joints. But that is something they do. They're trying to stack all of their weight over the joints of their fingers. Orangutans don't knuckle walk. They do something a little bit different. They kind of roll their hands into fists and then walk on their fists right there. This is different than what we see for all other Old World primates here. Old World monkeys, they actually have their heel up, so they're kind of more walking on their fingertips here. And in our apes here, we have our heel is lowered and is on the ground. What's interesting is this is kind of helped us because in humans, we have our heel on the ground and our feet. We actually have the middle of our foot raised, which allows us to have this really rigid foot that's good for bipedal walking. Of course, last but not least, it's us. It's genus Homo, or humans. There's a lot of different variation out there in humans, lots of different shapes of faces, lots of different skin colors. We are bipedal. Some people like to say we're special. And this will be the focus of the rest of the class, talking about humans, how do we fit, and what does all this variation mean? So we have talked about a lot of different primates, and there's so many different names. I know it was a little overwhelming when I was first learning. So here is a graph to show you how everything is related. Let's start at the top. So first we have order Primates. If you're saying it colloquially, you can say primates. If you're saying the official scientific name, order Primates. The next division below that, we have our Strepsirrhines and then our Haplorhines. Let's look within our Strepsirrhines. We have infraorder Lemuriformes, but within Lemuriformes, we have our Lemurids and our Lorisoids. You can see the ending of each of these scientific names gives you a clue as which level on this hierarchy. You can see the ones on the side, order, suborder, infraorder, parvorder, superfamily, family, and subfamily. And that's why being a little bit familiar with those endings will help make it a little bit more sense. You know, we have a couple different families in our lemurids. In our lorisoids, we have our lorises and galagos. Now let's look at our haplorhines. We have our tarsiers or tarsiiformes versus our simiiformes or anthropoids. Tarsiers, kind of off on their own, doing their own thing. And within our simiiformes or anthropoids, we have our platyrrhines and catarrhines. Platyrrhines, we have our cebids, callitrichids, pitheciides, and atelids. And our catarrhines, we still have our cercopithecoids or old world monkeys, and then our hominoids or apes. So using something like this will help relate all of these groups together, because some groups are actually much smaller than other groups. You don't want to compare just hominoids or apes to all of strepsirrhines, because hominoids is a much smaller group than our strepsirrhines. We've talked about a lot. But what if you want to learn more? There's a couple of really good websites that will help you learn more about primates. The first one is the New England Primate Conservancy. So here you can learn a little bit about primate conservation, but also educate yourself about the different groups. So they have at a glance on the different primate groups and then more in-depth profiles on different types of primates. You can also learn about how to help them a little bit more. There's also Primate InfoNet. This is a great page put together by the National Primate Research Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So here they have fact sheets, but one of my favorite things about this website is they also have primates in the news. So you can learn like what's going on, what are people talking about. Another great place to look is the IUCN Red List. So this is the official list of what is endangered and what is not. There are also several different categories for what type of endangered you are. So here you can search by a common name or a scientific name. I find that this is a great place to learn more about what species are out there, but also how they're doing in the wild. A caveat for using the IUCN Red List is it is subject to bureaucracy. So sometimes when we discover a new primate, it takes a couple years for it to actually show up in the IUCN Red List. So it is a couple of years behind new discoveries and species names for that reason. And lastly, we have GBIF, or our Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So this will give you occurrence data for different species. You can search a species, and then we'll show you all of the different places that people have seen it. So it'll help you get a better idea of the ranges of different species. So now that we've talked about everything, test yourself. Can you name all of these different primates? It does help to know have an idea of what different primates look like. I can name these on site, but also think about the different traits that we talked about with different primates. Can you get an idea of what they are based on what you know about the different primate groups?